Hello, this is Ian Stewart, and welcome to the People of Earth podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the People of Earth podcast, where we interview the top performers in the New York City world music scene. Before we get to today's interview, I've got a couple of announcements to make. First and foremost, you'll probably notice that this episode is airing on a Wednesday. I'm actually going to be regularly posting on Wednesdays instead of Mondays now. With the spring, my performance schedule is getting a little more busy during the weekends, so it's a lot easier for me to post the episodes on Wednesdays. So, just a note for anyone who's paying attention, tune in on Wednesdays. That's when the podcast will be going up. In addition, we have another People of Earth performance coming up a week from today, next Wednesday, at Rockwood Music Hall, Stage 2, which we haven't played since November, so we're very excited about that. And set starts at 10:30, and I believe it's just a 1-hour set. You can find all the information on that at peopleofearthmusic.com. All right, with all that being said, let's get to this week's interview. This week's guest is the great bassist Ben Zwerin. Ben is a bassist, writer, and producer originally from France. He graduated from the Berklee College of Music and has been a very busy bass player in New York for quite some time now. He has performed, recorded, and collaborated with Junacho Herrera, who was another guest on this podcast, and has also played with Claudia, Acuña, Lila Downs, and is the current touring bassist for the great singer from Benin, Angelique Kidjo, who Yayo Sarka also plays with. The interview you're about to hear is actually almost a year old. I did this last April of 2017. I met with Ben at his home. He was very, very nice and inviting, and we had a really cool conversation that kind of runs the gamut from his upbringing, of course, his story of going to Berklee, coming to New York, growing up in France, where he's originally from. And it kind of goes off from there into his love of traveling, his thoughts on globalization, the meaning of music and society in general, and countless other things. It's a really great interview, and I really enjoyed doing it. All right, I'm not going to give too much away about this interview. It's a fairly long interview, so sit back and relax, and I'll see you on the other side. On behalf of the People of Earth podcast, I present to you the awesome Ben Zwerin.
I guess, as early as you want to.
Well, I was born.
I mean, if you feel...
Well, I guess I'll tell you where I'm from and stuff.
Sure, whatever you feel is significant,
Sure. So, I was born in France. My dad, whose name is passed away 7 years ago, Mike Zwerin, was a musician. And who early on became a writer, wrote about music. For the most part, from my life, he was writing for the International Herald Tribune, which is no longer. Now it's the International New York Times. But it was based in Paris, and he was American, but he wrote about music. So I grew up, basically going to festivals with him, with musicians at the house all the time, and I grew up around music and musicians.
Oh, wow, okay.
My mom was sort of in that world as well. Worked for a magazine and for a label when she was younger, but. Just for that period of time, I'll make it short. But I never, I studied music. I played music with my dad all the time.
What did your father play?
He played trombone and bass trumpet, actually, for the most part. But it's the same embouchure, and he came from trombone.
Yeah, he's same mouthpiece.
Same mouthpiece, yeah. But it kind of looks like a valve trombone a little bit, but it's a classical instrument that has a different sort of timbre. It's a really beautiful instrument. And I don't know, like I always tell the story that you know, I used to have like my bass teacher and people that were friends that would come over would always tell these like horrible stories about gigs, you know, whatever it was like just. I remember him one particular story where he was playing for a monkey. I don't know, it wasn't like a circus, but it was something like that. And he would tell stories how the monkey would like punch him in the nuts, and like the monkey would like come over and take his beer, like all sorts of weird things. And I remember all these stories, and I was really good in school, and I was doing my thing and playing on the side, and I was gonna, you know, become some kind of engineer, or I was gonna be like acoustical engineer or something.
Okay, so like you were really into math and
yeah, I was into math and physics.
Do you have siblings by any chance?
I don't. I was an only child. I am an only child.
You would not believe how many people I've interviewed happen to be only children.
Oh, really?
It's
Interesting.
the weirdest thing.
Well, I wonder if there's a weird correlation between that and playing world music.
That thought has crossed my mind.
Interesting.
Yeah. I'll talk about that more when we finish.
That's funny. Yeah. So I was studying. I was doing all that. I was going to go to university, and you know, after the baccalaureate in Paris, and then one day I was talking to, you know, this same teacher, and he was telling some story, and then I was older at that point. I looked at him and I was like, yeah, but do you love it? And he was like, oh, it's amazing. And then the truth about being a musician came out. Suddenly I realized that all these stories are actually part of a larger thing that was special, you know? So between that and the fact that I wanted to do a part-time music school, and it was not part-time, and I just decided, you know what, let me do this for a year and see, and maybe go back to school if I don't like it. But so that's how I got to you know, be more serious, and then eventually went to Berklee, which was tied to the school I was in Paris.
Oh, okay.
So the audition there, got a scholarship, you know, went there for a year, 20 years ago. But yeah, I mean, back then I was playing mostly, my dad was a, you know, jazz musician, so I was doing mostly that and a good amount of funk, and I had a rock band. My first band was sort of a rock band.
Yeah. Do you play upright as well?
I don't.
You don't?
No, I always played on electric.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, my first band was a rock band, so I guess I started playing more rock and funk and, you know, Hendrix and 60s stuff. And Steppenwolf and all that kind of stuff. And parallel to that, you know, I was playing jazz with my dad, which my friends at the time were not, but I was kind of raised in that. And it's interesting because there's definitely something that happened when I got to Berklee. I mean, I do still play a lot of rock. I do still play a lot of funk and, you know, R&B and all that stuff. I mean, it's a good part of what I do when I produce a bunch, and when I do, it's often like pop or, you know. But I did get to Berklee, get to Boston, and suddenly was surrounded by foreigners. I mean, none of my friends were American, you know, except for my roommates and the friends I had through that circle.
I see.
But the music circle was immediately all from Latin America, you know, everywhere, but, you know. So it's interesting. I don't know, and sometimes I think about that, and I don't know if it has to do with just being a foreigner yourself. Somehow you flock to foreigners. There's something that, you know, no matter how much I grew up with the culture, with my dad, with the American culture, and I grew up speaking English and all that, so there wasn't as much of a divide as some of, you know, my friends and some other people you talk to and stuff.
Right.
But still, there was a big cultural divide, which I felt up until maybe 2000, like even 5 years after I was here. Like when I first toured with a rock band, like toured here, I remember being in the car and just realizing, and listening to music with them and stuff, and realizing, wow, I could play so many records that they wouldn't even know what I'm talking about, from Salif Keita to, you know, to Ruben Blades. But whatever they're listening to now, which is what I thought I knew, which is rock and pop and stuff, I realized I don't. I mean, I didn't grow up with the same TV shows. I didn't grow up with the same. Right. So Welcome Back Carter was like, what are you talking about? Like the guy wanted to cover that, and I was like, yeah, you don't know.
I don't even know.
Yeah. I mean, what was the theme for a TV show? I couldn't actually tell you what the TV show was right now.
Right. No, you would know the song, heard the name,
and you would know the tune. Yeah, you'd recognize the tune. I can't remember what it is now.
How old are you? I can't remember.
I'm 41.
Okay, so you're 10 years older than I am.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, that would probably explain a little bit of why you probably have TV shows that I don't.
Well, that too. Yeah. No, the generational thing is a whole nother story. But
right.
But there was just this culture thing, because these guys were all pretty much my age. But I was like, wow, okay, so, you know, I'm not American as much as I think I am. I mean, I
Okay.
just didn't grow up here.
So,
you know?
but would you say that when growing up, you did feel a little bit that you somehow were because maybe your father and stuff? You felt
Yeah.
connected to American culture.
I was the American kid when I was in France,
Really?
and I was the French guy when I got to the U.S.
Of course.
It's just, I don't know, I don't think it has anything to do with me. I think it's just sort of how it works with the fact that you have an element that's not from there and that's kind of exotic or different, and that makes you that element.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
That element kind of becomes you. And I mean, I was obviously very French too. It wasn't like, you know, I was alienated or anything, but I definitely, you know, had, and the music was also, I had another side because of the music. I mean, I remember just my friends getting together to do things sometimes, and I was just like, yeah, no, I'm going to go to a show with my dad, you know?
Yeah, okay.
There was a whole other side as well.
Interesting. Okay, cool.
But yeah, getting to the States immediately, Brazilians mostly, but just that was the crowd I was in.
Okay.
And, you know, a part of that was also because I was in a music school that was like, you know, whatever, 80% men, and out of the 20% of women, maybe half of them were lesbians, and there was very few girls in the pool of, you know.
Music
so hanging out with
exactly.
So hanging out with Brazilians was also a means to meet girls.
Oh yeah. Okay.
I mean, you know,
Yeah.
it was like parties with regular people, and you know, it was like nice.
Yeah. Well, I thought you French guys don't have too much of a problem with that either.
Well, yeah, but I mean that's kind of true, but the pool of like the choice was not there.
Okay.
And Boston is a weird place. Like you don't really, I don't know. It's not like
I've never lived there, so
yeah. It was a weird thing. So every now and then, one of us would find like somebody would befriend somebody who was at a regular school, like at Northeastern or whatever. Northeastern, Northeastern, and it was like, oh, cool, in Chicago, yeah. So it was like, oh, cool, those parties, new set of people with a lot of girls, or you know. And for us, it was the Brazilians, which actually was both, because it was also so much music. I mean, it was like and that was a completely new world for me.
So you did get into heavily into Brazilian.
Yeah, I mean, I ended up with a Brazilian girl as well, and she brought back all of those books. There's this collection of books that have sheet music from every single, you know, song with in good Brazilian manner with guitar, you know, chords, tab.
Nice.
Because you know they all play guitar, and that's the thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I got deep into that, and I started living with this drummer who I toured with a bunch, Giuliano Zanoni, who was a great drummer, who doesn't play much anymore. I think he's back in Brazil. But we started, and we got a house that we rented where we built like a rehearsal space. So we started doing sessions regularly, and he would get charts from this guy, you know, Hermeto Pascual?
Yeah, of course.
So he would get charts from him somehow through whatever, and we played with like weekly with our other roommate who is a great saxophone player. Felipe Salas is his name. And so we would play, who you might know, because he's around. He plays sometimes with like Clave Secreta and some of those bands. He's in Boston, but he's here playing.
Which guy?
Felipe Salas. He plays tenor.
Yeah. Well, I know a lot of the guys in La Clave Secreta.
I had a feeling in that world. Yeah. So Felipe was my other roommate.
I know. Yeah, there is one Brazilian guy in the band. Yeah.
Yeah, so he's like with glasses. He's a teacher.
Yeah. Real straight looking guy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Great player.
Yeah, kind of graying hair a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah. Exactly.
I mean, I haven't seen him in a little while, but yes.
Yeah.
So he was my other roommate. So we would do sessions, the three of us, with keyboards and sometimes Manu Koch, you know Manu, and that scene. Yeah, exactly. So we would do regular stuff, and I got deep into the Brazilian scene. And the thing about growing up in Paris is that there was a lot of African music around.
Yes, exactly.
I wasn't really in it, but I knew. My dad knew the guy who brought Fela for the first time. Like it was around. You know, and there was music everywhere and Africans everywhere, and then Cuban music was there as well.
There is a Cuban community.
There's a good Cuban community, and so there was people like this guy called Tito Puentes, which was hilarious because people would actually really go to show thinking it was Tito Puente. I think even after he died, people would still go and thinking it was him.
Just not knowing any better.
Just not knowing, yeah.
That's funny.
So there was a bunch of Cuban music, and that I got into, early on. Not deep, but I got I did an ensemble, and it was fun, and because I could groove, I kind of learned with them, and then we played a couple of concerts and stuff. So I knew a little bit about that, but Brazilian music, there's Brazilians there, but somehow I really did not get into it until.
Okay, so that was like a new thing for you.
It was a new thing,
a new exciting thing for you in Boston.
Yeah,
you're supposed to get into
that I really connected with.
And did you really kind of? Well, you said you were doing heard about squall charts, but did you really kind of like go down the rabbit hole with like all the recordings and all that kind of stuff?
I have CDs and CDs and CDs,
Okay.
a lot of which are just copies of my friends made, but of all of Caetano Veloso's, all of, you know, some João Bosco, all of Chico Buarque, all of that stuff. And then, you know, of course, the songs we played, just because we were also in school, was a lot of Jobim and, you know, the standards, you know.
But you'd say that was the first, like, style that you really kind of, you know, went all out on.
Yes.
So, okay.
I mean, world music-wise.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, definitely. That was my sort of entrance into that world. And so the thing that got really interesting to me was realizing, and this is up until a few years ago in a way, because that definitely carried into New York, is realizing that for me, I don't want to generalize. I've talked to a lot of people who feel the same way, but I know that there's differences within every culture, within every community. For me, with Brazilians and Africans in general, if you groove, you'll play with them, and you'll just learn while you're playing. Like it doesn't. There's not. Basically, what I'm getting to is that the clave police is something that really turned me off, because I realized that with the Cubans, except for a few where I basically made the decision. You know what? I play this way, and I understand the rhythms. And this is my whole philosophy with music, and especially in world music, is me. I'm doing me. I don't want to sound like a baby bass. I don't want to sound like this guy or that guy. I'm not going to play the exact line, except if it's part of the arrangement. I'm going to play me within the context of this music. Play the rhythms. I understand the rhythms. I've learned the rhythms with people, with books, with whatever. But I'm going to do me. And in the Latin community, it's not always possible at all. You have to really be like close to traditional.
It's a stylistic thing.
Yeah.
You have to. Yeah, the subtleties have to be there, or you're in trouble.
Yeah, and it's a little closed off in that sense, except for a few,
right.
And then the few that are not are doing incredible stuff, I think.
Well, yeah, definitely the South American scene's a lot more open. That I've in my experience.
Than the Caribbean, you mean? Than Cuba, and yeah.
Because it's like
true, Colombia,
and especially guys like Junacho, who I know you know really well.
Yeah, well, that's my main. That's where I kind of got.
Those guys are a lot more artistic. They're about. It's not about a bunch of rules that you have to follow.
No,
that's for sure.
All the rhythms are in there, and they're very important. But for example, in this case, with the trio, Juancho, Yayo, and I, they know those rhythms a lot better than I do, and it doesn't matter. As long as we're playing them together and grooving together, he hires me for me.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, which is what I'm getting to. But I think Yayo was into that concept before. But for me, with Juancho, I kind of honed into it a little bit because while I was playing with Juancho, I mean, I've known Juancho forever, but somehow when we got to New York, we would do some similar gigs, and I would do some Cuban gigs with some people, and just would have fun somehow. It wasn't really fun, and then I would do a Brazilian gig, and it'd be great. And even if I didn't know some of the songs, it would be so fun because, I mean, whatever changes, you learn the changes, but the groove was there.
Right.
So they didn't care, and then learned some of the hits and stuff. You know, as we went, and I started realizing that. And then there was Juancho in the middle, where I was like, wow, I can be me, and rock, and be funky, and do all of that within the context of Venezuelan merengue. In 5.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, whoa, that's a completely new thing to me. I've never heard 5 this way. I've never heard this kind of tumbao, but it's like, and he doesn't care if I play the 1 here and there. Or, you know what I mean? Like, he wants my sound. I have an old sound. Most people in that style don't. You know, it's usually more active basses, which is kind of true in African music as well. People are...
the fact that you play P-bass.
I play an old P-bass, so I have an old Rickenbacker, and like stuff that's wide, not, you know, it's more, in Latin music it would be more like Irakere and like the 70s stuff.
Yeah, the retro.
Which is not really, you don't hear that so much these days, right?
No.
People usually have more active basses, which is a little 5 strings, and it's a little bit like that in African music too. It's like there's a sound of like sort of the 80s, and it kind of stayed, and that's the sound you need to have to be able to gig in that world, kind of.
Yeah, I didn't quite think about it that way, but no, you're
again generalizing, and there's a lot of exceptions, but
But you definitely don't see. I mean, from a bass player. I mean, now we're talking about bass-oriented stuff, but like,
But
no, definitely like in Timba, which I mostly do.
Yeah.
You know, that like a Fender P bass sound. 4-string Fender P bass sound is just not part of it. And not that I don't like. I would love to play with that kind of sound with certain things, but
that's just not what people expect or want.
It existed in Cuban music back in the 70s and 80s with Ritmo Oriental and all those bands and stuff like that. I mean, they were playing also on really crappy instruments too, but that had a charm.
That had the sound.
Like Eggman's and old German manufactured basses and no one ever heard of before since.
Somehow ended up in Cuba.
Exactly. So those sounds were those analog sounds were there. But once the 90s hit, it just kind of just faded away.
Yeah, and then people get used to a certain sound. I mean, that's a big thing. I think about that sometimes because I'm thinking about maybe doing some like clinics and stuff because I was talking to Yayo about that and I think he does a certain amount of them, and my perspective I think is a bit different coming from where I come from. But the sound is definitely a huge thing, and then the approach to the rhythms is sort of another, And the sound to me, like sound is huge. I think sound as a musician is one of the biggest elements of what makes it you.
Right.
And I think it's something that Europeans, for example, don't have as much. And I talk to producer friends of mine over there who have been here and stuff, and sometimes they're like, man, drummers come in that don't really know how to tune their drums even. Or like, sound is not as important. People want to learn how to play a lot of stuff, but they don't. Like, for me, sound is like, man, when I hear somebody with a good sound, that's what gets me goosebumps.
When did you become first aware of that?
I don't know. It was definitely post Berklee.
Really? Okay.
Berklee was like, the whole joke we have with a bunch of friends is like, you leave school and your instruments, because I play pretty low. I have like down here. It's like a rock. Which is just, for me, it's more of a hand thing. It's not a look thing. It's because of this hand was starting to get tight with tendonitis, my right hand.
Oh, really?
So if it was too high, it would be bent more. And when it's low, it's not. This one is, but this one never had an issue. This just doing this fast was the issue. So when it's down low, I don't have an issue. It's straighter. So that's kind of why that happened. But the whole joke we have is that you leave school and often your instrument is higher. And for us, it was like the whole thing was like bringing it down little by little, back down to where it was when we first were 14 and started out.
Okay, I like that. That's cool little war cry.
Yeah, exactly. It's like rebelling against the school. Like, no, I will take back who I was before.
Yeah, well, I totally relate to that. You're not the first person to say that by any means. Like that whole uninstitutionalizing yourself, that process. I find it to be a fairly common tale amongst fairly successful musicians. Post college, and they often were people that felt that their identities were kind of robbed of them a little bit.
It's a weird music education is a weird concept, because if you look back in the day, music education was not going to school. It was listening to records and learning and hanging out. Like, I love Yayo, and that's one thing I love about Yayo is that he's old school like that. He has a friend who lives in his building that comes to hang out at his shows and helps him set his drums up and stuff, and that's how he's learning. In a way, it's like this, and drummers do that much more. You didn't talk about that. Yeah. Joshua was a good friend. His uncle was a friend of ours, and he'll come. He'll carry his stuff. He'll help pack whatever. But he also will sit in every now and then. You will throw him a gig every now and then, and he's learning. It's like it's the old concept, which drummers do a lot in Berklee, at least. With Jamie Haddad. That's what people did. Like, I have a lot of friends who did that. Matthias Kunzli, people would go and hang out with him. And while you're hanging out, you're learning stuff because of the vibe, because of what he says, because of watching him play up close, because of
just being there.
Just being there and absorbing. And I love that. And that's an interesting way to learn versus being in classes with, not always great teachers and people who don't necessarily care that much because they're just kind of there because they didn't make it or whatever. You have sometimes amazing teachers. I mean, in every school, Berklee included. But what's interesting, I just met somebody a couple of days ago who just got back. We did a gig with him. He just got out of Berklee recently. And he was kind of like, when he told me, he was kind of like, sorry. Like, he had this whole, like, apologizing. I went to Berklee, even though he knew I did too. But I told him, it's funny. For 10 years or so after that, there was that. Like, I remember being always kind of like, I went to Berklee, but You know?
Oh, okay. All
Like sort of trying, like you said, to institutionalize yourself. But now it doesn't matter as much. I don't know if it has to do with the fact that all of the people we went to school with, are doing great. You know what I mean? Like the people you meet through the connection of the school is so good that that's good enough. Or if we're just from being more mature and successful, not money wise and what gigs do I have, but just like as an instrumentalist, like just finding your sound and all that.
Sure.
None of that stuff really matters, as much.
Would you say that? I mean, I know a lot of people. I mean, when you moved here, were you immediately from day one kind of using the community that you had built at Berklee?
I mean, maybe not as a big community, but like the first gigs I did here, which was like restaurant gigs, were with Brazilians, with this guitar player friend of mine and his wife, ex-wife now, and we played in some restaurants like Jules and stuff like that, and
so
absolutely.
So you do feel, I don't know about even now. I mean, do you still feel connected to that group?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I mean those are like Lionel Loueke, Avishai Cohen. Those are all my peeps, and they're all doing great. And we meet on the road here and there, and we've totally.
Yeah, when did you graduate, by the way?
98, I believe. I mean, it was like weird because at the end you stay just to do like one credit here and there.
Yeah.
I think I graduated in 98, and I stayed till 2000.
Oh, okay,
Boston.
So you moved to
New York around 2000.
Yeah, just because that's the year that people get here is kind of...
Sure, to see the batch you're part of.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I did want to make sure that, because some people like have different outcomes as to whether they, like, some people don't. I've actually met some people that didn't like necessarily create those kind of connections at school, even if they went to like a major school.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Most people do, but
I mean, I can't tell you that all the work I get is through that, but it's definitely been an opening at the beginning, and it's been a family, and we're all aware of each other, and thanks to like Facebook and stuff, we stay in touch, and it's definitely a little group within that whole class of people we were in is still a family, for sure.
And who would you say some of the most important people, like as far as like...
So some of the ones that are making the most noise, they're not necessarily the ones I'm in touch with the most, are Avishai Cohen, the trumpet player.
Oh, okay. No, I mean, who, important to you, like as far as
Well, Junacho.
Junacho,
for example, Yuval. Do you know Yuval Lion? Lion?
Lion?
He was only at Berklee for like a year, but he's one of my favorite drummers and closest,
Israeli guy?
Yeah, Israeli guy, lefty, great drummer. I was gonna say Yayo, but he wasn't at Berklee, but somehow, and then right when I got to New York, and that was it. But who else are people that I still see a lot? Well, Manu was a really good friend, Manu Koch, but I don't see him very often.
That's okay. It doesn't have to be that many people.
Yeah. There's a few that are really part of my everyday life, and even personally. Like Juancho is somebody that I see, we have dinner together, and with his girlfriend, his wife, and my girlfriend,
Right. Okay.
So yeah, I mean, you went through a lot of stuff together. I mean, and then you also toured together, and we played together with different artists.
Yeah.
Over the years, Fred, there's this guy called Frederick Rubens, who's a producer, they become one of my best friends. We lived together. We produced some stuff with Brazilian girls. He did a bunch of stuff. He's great. He's not producing as much right now, and he moved to Paris for a while, so we met a lot of my friends there. So we're
This is a question. I mean, it's kind of an odd question, or maybe kind of general. Would you consider yourself to be someone that makes social connections pretty easily?
Yes.
You are? Okay.
Yeah. I'm a pretty social person. I like it, and I try to keep in touch with people, and Facebook has really helped me for that. I mean, it's keeping in touch with people around the world is. I mean, with Angelique, they not as much now anymore, but when we first started touring, they would joke that I had guests in every city in the world that we went to, because of a lot of it was Berklee, and it's big, you know, family, because even when we went to Mozambique, I posted, do I know anybody there? And a friend of mine said, oh, you got to get in touch with Joni. He's great. And this guy was a great musician who totally hooked us up. And,
nice.
You know, he knew everybody there. And I mean, it was great.
So you sound like kind of a connecting figure yourself.
Like, I like to think so. And I do like to connect with people and connect people.
To each other.
Absolutely. I do that all the time, especially when people go to Paris. I'll send a message to all my friends there that I think would be relevant to them and them.
Yeah,
and
so
things
it's
like
a fun thing for you. It's something that energizes you a bit.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. So, so really, what was your trajectory kind of like since moving here in 2000? What was what was the more or less, as best as you can, kind of the linear path, I guess? That you had?
That's a good question. I haven't really reflected on it like that. I mean, there's a few things that happened. The world music thing happened more and more through Junacho, through a singer called Karina, a Brazilian singer, Karina Zeviani, who I played with at New Blue for years. And Yayo did that as well for years.
So you did quite a bit of stuff at New Blue?
Yeah, New Blue is like family. It's the one place in New York that Rockwood a little bit too, but New Blue definitely. Yeah.
So New Blue is a very important place.
Yeah, New Blue's been very important. Hasn't been as much as of late, but for years I played there every week for years. So I mean, all those people there were like, you know, people I hung out with all the time, and you know.
No, the names that keep popping up are New Blue, Terrace 7, and Barbez. You know, I played at all those places, but you know, everybody talks about at least one of them.
Yeah, well, I think they all have something in common, is that they all have a lot of world music, but in a very open, you know, sort of experimental way.
Yeah, right.
Very New York, like Barbez will have, you know, bands like, you know, the mix, whatever. It's all kind of similar. New Blue's a little more electro.
Right.
So it'll be world, but with electro
and
more.
DJs,
not all the time, but in DJs and stuff. So they kind of made that.
Terrace does not have.
Right.
Barbez does not.
Terrace is a little more. It's more Latin in general, I feel like.
But specifically South American.
Specifically South American. That's true. That's true.
That's their thing.
You're right. Like a Peruvian and all that stuff. You're right with Eric and all that. But and it's maybe of the three, the sort of more traditional, but still it feels very open. And a few times I played there, I always felt very open-minded and very, you know, open to trying things. And yeah, New Blue is definitely a big important place for me. I mean, also, you know, for me to see bands like Brazilian Girls or Forró in the Dark.
Okay, yeah.
You know, which all those guys, you know, Mauro, Guilherme, all those guys were. Guilherme is another good friend from Berklee, the guitar player in Forró in the Dark. He's not around as much anymore. He's in Brazil more now, but those. You know, that was important for me because it was seeing Brazilian music in a really mix with just rock and like just more raw and very New York, and it was something that I always felt but never really had the opportunity to play. Mm-hmm. Because when I was playing Brazilian music in Boston and stuff, I was learning it, so it was usually pretty traditional. Yeah. And once I started getting more into, you know what, this is the sound that I want, is my sound from when I was a teenager. Like, that's what I'm hearing. Within that context, I didn't get that many opportunities to do it. I did with the singer at Berklee, at New Blue, but that was more electro than Brazilian from my perspective. It was a little more groove bass lines, you know. But, you know, based on Brazilian rhythms, there was some like maracatu and things in there, but it was pretty groove based. I think it was probably more Brazilian from the drummer's perspective, even though that too, you know, you would have a lot of four to the floor, dancey beats, but
right.
But that was, for me, one moment started opening, but also just seeing there's other bands doing it, you know, like Forró in the Dark was just really, really exciting and interesting.
Yeah.
You know?
Cool.
And seeing people just dancing and, you know, loving it, and like, it's like, wow, yeah, you know, like you can make people dance, but it doesn't have to be pop or techno. It can be something that has...
something in between,
Yeah, and also there's something about world music where there's a certain substance that, you know, as a foreigner, I'm more used to, I guess. But as Americans, if you come from the Midwest or something you have no idea about.
Yeah.
And so if you grew up on pop music, Southern rock and roll or something, or techno dance music, I can really get down with any of those things. There's great things in any of them. But it's not as deep as African music where, wow, that's your roots. That's everybody's roots.
Yeah.
You know, like last week we were in Morocco with Yayo, with Angelique, and one of the drummers was like, it's a rock band. It's like Rage Against the Machine-ish, and they're apparently the biggest rock band there. I mean, obviously we had no idea where they were, but... And after that, we were at the hotel, we were hanging and smoking, and the guy started giving the drummer a history of the rhythms, Moroccan rhythms, and how they came with the slaves and the whole thing. And it's like, wow, it's so deep.
Yeah.
You know, the background of it is incredible. And so to see that can be mixed with something that, like, suddenly kids are, like, there because they want to dance and do drugs and whatever, but what they're hearing is, without their even knowing, is educating them somehow.
Well, actually, I just thought of that too, because you have this obviously very singular individual identity when it comes to music, and you feel, you kind of have talked about how you feel that no matter what you're doing, you have a strong concept of what you do,
yes.
And you kind of put that into all the things that you do.
Yeah, but then exactly. So then but then you have this little piece, that little piece. So I'm going to have to add a tumbao kind of element.
Right.
I'm going to have to add a 6/8 African element, or whatever it is, to my language and to my vocabulary. And then at first it's very confusing, like learning another language or two.
Right.
And then eventually you have to hope that it becomes just natural.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The only time I've actually ever heard you play, I'll be honest,
No.
is a video you did with Junacho, I think, like Conga Head or something like that.
Oh yeah.
Kind of an early Conga.
Yeah, that was a while ago.
Yeah. And I think Yaya was on it too. It was the trio.
And we did some with Mauricio Herrera.
Oh, he was on there.
Yeah, but maybe there was one we did without him. It's possible.
I don't remember.
Was it a 1 in 5? Do you remember?
No, it was in 4. It was in 4. It was actually kind of.
We did 2 songs, I think.
It was using kind of a quasi. Cuban groove to it, but I know there's some styles of Venezuelan music that are similar as well. Similar bass lines,
Yeah. It was.
Stuff like that.
I think I know which one it was. Yeah. I think I remember the song.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was fun. I never went back, man. I always wanted to go for his parties and birthday parties and stuff.
Yeah, I've never been to them either.
Yeah.
I always find out about them like after the fact.
Me too.
It's like it's I feel like it's like someone finds out and then invites. It becomes like a series of like a chain of invitations.
Yeah.
Oh, it's happening today. You know, and if you're not in that chain of communication, you're not invited to the party. So
yeah, exactly.
You actually explained a lot more of the kind of concept stuff than really like your actual like the actual history of your time here, which is kind of interesting.
Right. Well, I mean, in the end, that's what it's more about, I guess.
If that's the case, that's cool.
I mean, listen, the history here is, you're right, we started on that, we didn't go further, but I mean, I did a lot of, I kind of feel like I have 2 parallel lives that intersect in the concept. But I do still do a lot of rock and stuff, and with all the crowd of people I'm in, Junacho, all those people, none of them, like all of them listen to rock and roll and stuff growing up, but none of them really play it. All of them love it, but there's a thing in that somehow happens that crowd of people, if you're not, you gotta really, it's almost like the Cubans for the rockers in a way, without being so tight, but like, you gotta know the style. You gotta be a rock. If you're a guitar player in rock and roll, you gotta be a rocker. You gotta have that sound. You gotta have those kind of licks. You have to have, and it's kind of hard to fake. And Junacho, I love Junacho because he's mixing it up in a way that's so interesting.
Right.
But I think in a way he would love to be a little more accepted in the rock community, but he doesn't quite have that sound. I think it's a great thing. I'm not sure that he would agree. I think he would like to have more of that sound. He thinks that he has it. But I think it's just hard to get into that thing. And so I have a little bit of that, and a little bit of that and pop and stuff. And again, in the production I do as well. I've always done it. I know the music well. I've toured doing it, But then there's also this whole other side that none of the American people can connect to, that sometimes I talk to them and they have no idea who the artists I'm talking about.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, and the fact that, I mean, I kind of wonder the fact that you're neither American nor, Brazilian, African, or Latino, but you're not an American either. Like, do you think that kind of...
I am, by the way, but...
Well, yeah, but
yes, I know what you mean.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're native born.
Yeah.
Do you think the fact that maybe like because you were kind of hard to pigeonhole in that sense, that's helped a bit, and you know,
help and hurt maybe? I don't know. It's possible too that it's some things, you know, like I don't like. Sometimes I end up in crowds where I feel like, with Americans, with foreign, like, you know, whatever foreigners, it doesn't, I don't feel that so much. But with Americans, sometimes I'm in a crowd where I feel like they look at me weird because every now and then I mispronounce a word or something, or like there's things I talk about and they're like, who is this guy? We're just talking about doing shots and listening to you know, AC/DC, and
I feel the same way half the time, but
yeah. Well, but that's interesting because it means it's not really a nationality thing. It's more of a culture. And an education, and you know, and I'm talking about people who are smart and great, and people I love. And I learned to really connect with that side and actually embrace it. At first, I was really trying to like fit in, and now I'm like, I don't care. I love it. You know, if I'm not as rock and roll as you, it doesn't matter. As long as I can rock, and you're gonna you know, you feel like you can hire me to play. I'm happy. I don't feel like I need to wear the clothes to fit in with that or whatever, you know.
Wow. Okay.
That's one side, and then the world music side is ever growing for me. I mean, you know, I've always listened to African music, but since I've been playing with Angelique Kidjo, it's like suddenly I'm in that world, and even though her music is not, you know, it's pretty mixed with funk and all other stuff, we're on bills with Youssou N'Dour, we're exposed to really heavy African music, and
right.
And again, I've always listened to Youssou N'Dour, Salif Keita, some of the bigger names.
And where is she from?
She's from Benin, West Africa,
okay.
Close to Senegal, Nigeria, which we've been to with her. It was great with Yayo. It was amazing.
That's a French-speaking country, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And amongst 50-something languages, but yeah.
And Lila Loueke is also from Benin.
From there.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, they've known each other a very long time. Him and her.
Okay.
He's actually going to play with us on in Carnegie Hall in early May. We're doing a show there, and he's going to be a guest. I mean, he's going to be part of the band, but he's a guest. You know, it's going to be awesome. And I knew Lionel from Paris. We went to the same school there, but yeah. So that's, I mean, that whole world is like, it's amazing how, you know, you start realizing how much things you know, but just being there and talking to people, how much the blues comes from Mali and how much, you know, or the Nile. I mean, all that stuff. We were talking about that with these guys in Morocco. It's like just the way slaves were brought up the Nile, and like how influenced that, you know, how that influenced rhythms, and then you start realizing the parallels between, you know, you have rumba in Congo that is directly where Cuban salsa came from.
Absolutely.
And then you have the sort of, you know, the egg going down the stairs. You ever heard that expression? For Brazilian music, right? For the elliptical groove, you have that with the Moroccans. It's a little different. For sure, it's a different swing, and it's more that the Moroccan is different from, but it's the same concept.
Yeah. Well, and Angolan music as well, like because that's where a lot of the slaves in Brazil came from.
Exactly, but but yeah. I feel like it's a different influence a little bit. At least Mozambique, I know a little more because I was there, but absolutely, and it's like it's so. To me, I realize it more and more now because I travel so much to all these places, which is, I think, the best thing that could have happened to my life as a human being.
Yeah.
I think that the most interesting part about world music for me is the world. I mean, I think that I've seen that in this genetic study I saw was going around Facebook where people got, you know, a bunch of people in a room and they did tests.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And like, of course, the Irish guy who hated Germans, it turns out he's part German, and, you know, all these things.
Right,
and
right.
These, you know, Palestinian and an Israeli, and it turns out they were both the other as well. And, you know,
or the Kurdish woman, which,
all of
that's actually not very surprising because they're right on top of
Palestinian Israelis neither, but but then you realize, and suddenly they start crying, and it's like, and you're like, that's going to bring traveling brings the world together.
Absolutely.
And Americans especially are one of the top countries that don't know, and that if they did, there would be so much less racism in this country.
Right. Well, also another thing about Americans that, like, I mean, with me in particular, there was a group that I toured with for 2 years, and I went all over this country with them, and, you know, to realize how little I knew about the United States alone, and how different
it's a big country.
Big country and
world music band you were touring with?
No, it was, well, sort of. It was I used to play in a group from Chicago. They're still together. Actually, they're playing at the Iridium next month, but called Marbin. It's a couple of Israeli guys that have a fusion group. We would, they're still together quite a long time ago, but they were signed to Moon June Records, so we used to open for like Alan Holdsworth and Scott Henderson and people like that. But they also bring in like they were really into tango, so like some of the songs were kind of like tango metal at the time. But they've gone way more in like the rock direction, rock blues direction.
Okay.
Because they play a lot in the South.
Okay.
And in Texas and stuff like that, so they
that's funny.
Kind of went more in that direction. I miss when it was more of like the Middle Eastern and tango kind of stuff, like because I thought that didn't sound like anything else.
Right.
But hey, but I'm not in that band. That band was never my band; it was theirs.
Yeah.
And
no, I was asking because just the context in which you tour is so interesting in this country too.
Yeah.
You end up in different types of places, and you end up treated differently, and you end up,
I've been to North Africa, but never the rest of Africa.
Yeah, where have you been in North Africa?
Morocco. Yeah. Egypt.
Yeah, I want to go to Egypt. I've never been.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's amazing. Because I feel like a lot of racism in this country in particular is not necessarily deep-rooted, but not just racism, but homophobia, all of that I think is rooted in this is the community you're in,
right?
That your parents and grandparents were in. It's all white, straight, Christian, So then anybody who's different,
right,
you're scared of, and it's
yeah,
weird.
yeah.
But if you go somewhere and you realize, oh, okay,
we're just regular people. Yeah,
this is the same shit as here, but there, and everybody there is black, and suddenly I'm the only white guy, but they're treating me fine.
Yeah.
Huh. Maybe there's something to that,
Well, yeah. Well, I know that. For instance, I guess this is something we could spend all day talking about, but which neither one of us have time for. But like, for instance, how would you? This is just to satisfy my own curiosity, because I mean, the guy that I live with is an Algerian French guy. Which I know is a very, 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 very common thing. But like, I mean,
well, it's not really. Yeah, I mean, it's French. I mean,
yeah.
It's a few generations where it's
and he is totally French through and through. But I'm just saying, like, it reminds me of like, because I find race relations in France to be absolutely fascinating, and I know it's a whole can of worms. It's a mess, and it's a whole big thing. But how would you, as someone that's lived in both places, would be able to compare the two? And I probably won't even write about this. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, it's completely different. It's such a different history,
Right.
I mean, France is the history of we went and screwed the whole world up and colonialized, whatever part of it. Yeah. But then we don't want you to come here after. And when you do, of course, you get marginalized and put into, projects and stuff. So, and now France is, if you look at the soccer team or whatever, which presidents, like Chirac said some racist shit about and stuff, but that's France. France is African, North African.
So multicultural.
They're French, and it's been for generations. And every president, every racist president who comes in tries to send people back. There's no back to where? I mean, those guys don't speak Arabic. They don't have family in Algeria anymore. They're French. I mean, that's what France is, which is great if it was accepted,
Yeah.
But it's full of minorities, and everybody hates each other, and the Jews and the Arabs hate each other, and everybody. It's like
Yeah, I'm guessing by your last name, are you
Jewish?
Are you
Not nobody in my family has been religious at all. But everybody's Jewish culturally.
And,
Eastern European mostly.
Yeah. When I saw Zwerin, it kind of that.
That's Ukrainian. My dad's was the American one. His parents came from Ukraine to the U.S. like early 20th century.
Very common tale.
Right, with that whole immigration.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Here, I don't know how to describe it here. It's such a weird situation in this country. It's so more complicated. I mean, of course, the racism against black people is obvious. I mean, it comes from slavery, and it's never really gone away.
Yeah, absolutely.
But all the other stuff is, I don't know, what is it? People came over for the promise of a better life and then realized, everybody said, who are they? They're different. So then they ended up staying together in Little Chinatown, Little Italy, and all that. Is that part of the problem? Does that mean that's why people didn't really assimilate?
I think that would have happened anyway. Well, I think the interesting thing is the ones that have and the ones that haven't.
Yes.
Obviously for the Irish, for the Italians, certain kinds of Eastern European, depending on what you are, Polish, if you basically, I hate to stigmatize it, but technically, if you're a white immigrant in a few generations, you will be part of everything else.
It's true. And if you're slightly brown, then suddenly it's not as easy. And
yeah, exactly. So
It's true, but I mean, it's interesting. All that. I mean, I know you said it's more for your curiosity, but to me, it's all tied. And world music is interesting because of that. Because if you travel to wherever, like Morocco, or like we were in Ethiopia a couple of weeks ago, you get there and you run into a band of Gnawa musicians from the desert somewhere, or you run into and you actually have an exchange, even if it's just listening to them, but if you actually have an exchange and you're like, wow, when the first time I went to Morocco, I was on vacation, but I ended up spending one night in the desert, and I remember talking to these Berbers, and they were like, one guy was like, man, very broken, whatever language, they spoke a little bit of English, a little bit of French, it was whatever, but we, a few of us stayed up and ended up in a tent with one of the guides, one guy, and we just talked for a while until late. And he was saying, you guys are so lucky that you can date, that you can try a bunch of people out and see who you feel good with. And he's like, I come from a tribe, and then there's the other tribe, and that's where I'm going to marry. And that's when, or marry, I'm not even sure if they marry, but this is how it's going to happen. There's no options. There's no choices.
You're right, yeah.
And realizing these things makes you feel, makes you appreciate what you have, makes you, all of that. And then to put all that in music, to me, is super interesting. And that happens more in places like New York, Paris. People mix that stuff together.
Right.
Suddenly you have Junacho, that's like taking a Venezuelan rhythm and putting some funk into it and a little rock into it, and maybe even some African stuff in there, and
some Raikuder and
some Raikuder,
that was the first thing I thought about when I heard him.
Interesting.
Was that whole thing, because he plays slide.
You play slide, it's true. I never thought about it, but it
brings in Americana elements into it as well.
Yeah.
Before I lose this thought of this question, this is really simple, but when you were in Paris, was your network of friends fairly diverse? Because I know that Paris is a very diverse place, but
not really. I mean, I had a few American friends and stuff, through my parents, but depends what you mean by diverse. It was diverse in the sense that I had black friends and Arab friends and stuff, but it was all French. I mean, I didn't really have friends that weren't French so much.
Yeah.
It wasn't as international of a community for me there at that time. And it is a lot more now. It's mixed more now for some reason. But
and what were your parents' views on, if you don't mind me asking, what were your parents' views on?
My parents are the most open-minded people I've ever met.
No, that's very important.
It's not. Yeah. Oh, it was never.
Because mine are, and I grew up in a very diverse area. Syracuse, New York has a lot of huge refugee population, and so I grew up in a very international community.
But your parents were not open to it?
No, very open.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Very.
Oh, it changes completely, for sure. I mean, everything comes from your parents, but even musically, I mean, my dad, sometimes he would write liner notes, and so he would get paid with not only, but part of his getting, well, not sometimes, but I remember a couple times it happened, where it was for big labels, and it would say, here's a catalog, just order whatever you want. This is the second half of your payment or whatever. And I remember him getting just excited like a kid one day, where we got a Coltrane box set and a Hendrix or Dylan, I can't remember the box set, and we went the whole afternoon listening from one to the other.
Nice.
And he loved both. And my dad, he never wrote about anybody. He was lucky that he chose what he wrote about, so it was never any negative about anybody.
Yeah.
And so I kind of grew up with that open-mindedness of it's Duke Ellington, there's two kinds of music, good and bad, it's not about I don't like this because it's no, it's good or it's bad, I like it or I don't like it, it's all open, it's all cool, it's all
right. It sounds like your parents didn't really tamper with what you were interested in either.
No, they were really cool. I mean, I think a big thing parenting wise to me is make sure that your kids instinct. They feel good, that their instincts are good because you educated them well, but also that they trust their instinct.
Oh, that's great.
I know a lot of people who don't, and that's definitely their parents. And I've talked to people where it's they second guess everything and all that because their parents told them, you know, you're worth nothing or you're whatever. However extreme that went with education, with me it was just like from the beginning I felt like, you know, I could trust my instincts and they totally encouraged that. And it was never, don't smoke weed, it's terrible. It was like, well, if you want to, let us know and we'll get it for you.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean? Like, it shouldn't be too early, maybe, whatever. But it was almost chill, and it's like drinking alcohol. You know, if here because it's forbidden until 21, people get wasted. Right, you know, if it's not that forbidden, you don't go into excess as much. Right. I started smoking weed when I was pretty young, but it was never an issue. I had friends where we were worried, and you know, yeah. So I mean, to be open-minded like that definitely helped with culture and helped with getting into this. I mean, helped. It wasn't a conscious thing.
Yeah, when you started talking about it, that was what I started to think of in the back of my head. Cause, it sounded like you had a pretty similar situation to me. Like I had parents that knew how to lay down the law, but didn't really. It was never in that kind of like, you know, enforcing rules kind of way.
Right.
Like it was, you know, we trust you to make decisions and, you know, and okay. So I mean, hopefully I'm not, you know, assuming too much, but it's no, I mean, that sounds right. That's definitely how it was for me. Yeah. Well, cool, man. Well, I got to get going here, but thank you so much. It's great.
Man, it's great. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed yourself.
Yeah,
All right. Thank you again for tuning in to the People of Earth podcast this week. That was Ben Zwerin in that great interview that you just heard. And if you want to find out more information on Ben, what he's doing, what he's done, and anything else you want to know, you can refer to his website at benzwerin.com. Also, for those who are curious, the audio examples that you just heard are Ben playing on Junacho Herrera's latest album, Gavillero. So if any of you guys like what you heard, do yourselves a favor and go check that out. It's a phenomenal album from top to bottom, and Ben plays great on it. Of course, for anybody interested in finding more information on myself and the People of Earth Ensemble, you can either refer to People of Earth's website at peopleofearthmusic.com, as well as my own website, ianstewartbass.com. Thank you as always for listening, and I'll see you next week.